Hey everybody, welcome to the Getting You Wellthy podcast. Today I have another special guest, and that is an old friend of mine, Tom Schneider. We used to lift with each other, or be with each other at the gym, you could say. And we kind of met each other that way. And then he's a few years younger than me, but that doesn't matter at all. He's probably one of the strongest guys I know. And let's all say hi to Tom. Tom, hi Tom.
What's up, Elliot? How you doing?
I'm doing good. So how did you get into fitness and exercise? And you can kind of tell people who you are, and then get into where it all started.
All right, so it's actually a really funny story. It's how I got into exercising. So in 8th grade, I was getting pretty heavy. Exact weight is probably around like 170, 180-ish, which at 13, 14 years old and 5'3" maybe, not exactly the best look or healthiest look. And my dad pretty much forced me into getting a personal trainer because he's a tax accountant and he had a client, and he hired him for me without me knowing. And his reasoning was, you're getting fat and you need to get in better shape. So that's how I got into exercising and lifting weights. And I'll just be honest, I freaking hated it at first. It was awful.
Sure.
Well, then you bench 135 pounds for the first time and you gain a little bit of self-confidence, and it's been all uphill, downhill, whatever trajectory you want to say since. So, yeah.
So since then, did you play any like sports like in high school?
I played for the Hastings Raiders football program, which, yeah, not too many good things to say about them. But yeah, I played some sports in high school, football. Played some town baseball for Hastings, as well as Meesville, Minnesota. Small little town about 20 minutes south of here.
Sure.
So fun times with that. Do I think weightlifting really carried over well with baseball? Not so much. With how I was training at the time, mainly because I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, I've always really been active with sports, and I've always just been very active in general, I guess, minus the weight gain in 7th, 8th grade, that range.
Sure. So did you, because your sport now is powerlifting, and so like when you were done with high school, in football or baseball, were you a powerlifter? Were you a bodybuilder? What was the deal?
With powerlifting, that happened a few years after I graduated high school. I think 4 or 5 total. So in between that time, I was always lifting weights. I focused more on hypertrophy style training, but I always really, really loved squatting, benching, and deadlifting. Particularly deadlifting, it's still my favorite lift and my best lift. But I always wanted to power lift because my sister competed. She actually took second, I think, at Raw Nationals in 2013 or 14, some range around there. So I've always kind of had that desire to do it. But I never really pulled the trigger on it until I was 23, 22, somewhere in that age range, if I remember right. So started powerlifting 2017-ish, it's 2017, 2018. And just kind of immersed myself in sports since.
Okay. And so starting out in powerlifting, like, can you go through that process of like, you already lifted weights, but like, I drive a car doesn't mean I'm like, going to become like a street racer or like a NASCAR driver. So like, what's the process of like, becoming a powerlifter?
Process is obviously following a proper program and structure of training for it. Secondly, finding a meet or organization that you would like to compete in, because there's various organizations you can compete in. I personally compete in the USAPL. There's the USPA, the WRPF, SPF, UPA, and a whole bunch of other ones I just can't get off the top of my head. But so the main thing with it is find a federation that you feel represents you the best, whether you want to compete in a federation that is drug tested, one that's untested, one that has multi-ply, which is a type of enhanced geared lifting, much like single-ply powerlifting. I compete in the Raw Federation, one, because it's what I always knew, just because that's what I was first introduced to. A lot of people say they were introduced to single-ply powerlifting first. Me, I don't think I have any desire to do single-ply just because that stuff hurts, like, really badly. really, really badly. I had a friend of mine wrap my knee once. Worst pain of my life.
Wow.
Like, could not do it. Don't want to do it.
Sure.
Sorry, Kip.
So you enter a meet, you get a coach, you like follow a program. Is nutrition or anything like a big part of powerlifting?
So that's something that I honestly get really annoyed with powerlifting. Is there's this ideology amongst some powerlifters that, oh, I do this so I don't have to worry about my diet.
Oh.
But the thing is just like any other type of athlete, your diet should be one of the most important factors of your entire training regimen. Your programming and conditioning work is great too, but your diet is what drives it. You're not going to, why would you fuel yourself? Because your diet is your food. Your food is your fuel. Why would you fuel yourself with inoptimal things? Like one of my biggest annoyances that I see on meet day or even in the gym quite frequently, kids are eating like candy and things like that for powerlifting, saying they need to have intra-workout carbs.
Sure.
And I'm like, you're doing like 3 sets of squat and deadlift. You're not pushing yourself to need that. And then they wonder why their stomach hurts or they don't perform well or like they have a bad body composition. So diet is very important, and the thing is everyone's diet is going to be different.
Yeah. So for people listening in, you work at a general nutrition company.
Yeah, GNC.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
General nutrition company. And so, how does supplementation or supplements like work into, your diet or like how somebody should be eating? Like, should they be doing real food or should it all basically come from like supplements?
Oh, for sure, real food.
Sure.
For sure, real food. I'm not saying don't use supplements. Supplements are great, but the thing is, look at the word supplement. You're supplementing something that's not readily available within your diet. So for me, like I use protein powders. I'll use some intra-workout carb powders too on occasion, mainly on like heavier training days, just because intensity levels are higher. But on days that I'm not training, honestly, the most important thing that you can supplement with, good multivitamin, vitamin D3, creatine. Those are the main things that you should do. Protein powders, protein shakes are great, but I only use them on days that I work out just because in that time frame of training, I'm not eating, so it's hard to keep my macronutrients high, stay on track with my diet, so it's easy to supplement that with a quality protein shake.
Sure.
So.
And there's like a lot of like ranges. I won't get really too much into it because we could talk about supplements on a completely different, show or podcast or whatever.
That'd be a fun
one. Like, yeah, it would be really fun. But like in general sense, you just listed off a few, simple supplements. There's so many different brands out there. Like, how do you, in your simplest form, like weed out like what's good and what's bad? There's a lot of crap out there.
There is a lot of crap. One, look for companies that have like GMP certifications. That means they've been manufactured in clean facilities. Look up companies that are Safe Sports certified, meaning they're free of any sort of contaminant, which I guess is GMP. So same thing essentially there. Sure. Main thing, look for a green check mark or some sort of certification on your supplements. Another thing, look at the ingredient profile. Some protein companies out here, it'll be like a 30-40 gram scoop, but you're only getting 20 to 30 grams of protein. So the rest of the stuff in there is just added filler. Mm-hmm. So one thing in particular with a lot of protein companies, look for if they have like creamers or anything like that added to it, because especially with whey protein isolates, a lot of companies, what they'll do with that, they'll just if they're adding in creamer to flavor it, they're just putting back in all the stuff they filtered out of it to make it an isolate.
Sure.
So basic things like look for quality manufactured products, Safe Sports certifications, and clean labels.
Okay.
Clean ingredient labels, I should say.
That's some really good tips right there. So let's kind of get back into your, you kind of built this up, through like nutrition, like how you got into the sport, what to kind of stay away from when you come to supplements. So like your sport, let's talk about you for a while, I guess. That's why you're here. So take us through like your last season, like kind of like where you started with powerlifting, like your weights through your 3 lifts. And then, kind of go through that, what and where you're at.
All right. So, in 2020, well, honestly, with everything that was going on, meets weren't really a thing for the majority of the time, especially in Minnesota. I did get to compete at the Arnold in the Battle of the Regions meet. that was the only meet that I've done and the only meet I have done since. I've kind of taken an extended break, mainly due to like injury, rehabbing injury, illness, things like that. Just trying to come back and make sure when I do actually compete, it's to my fullest capacity. In terms of like what I've hit, what I've done, best of my 3 lifts, I've squatted 574 in competition. I've missed 590 back-to-back meets for stupid reasons. One, I threw up in my mouth on my 3rd squat at Nationals, which is why I missed it. Didn't puke on the platform, just caught it. Then at the Arnold, I got called for depth, which was the right call. Still kick myself over that because it hurts to miss a lift for technicalities like that.
Sure.
But at the same time, grow from it, learn from it, become a better lifter. Best bench press I've done was 374 pounds, once again at the Arnold. Best deadlift is 650 at USAPL Raw Nationals in 2019.
Okay. And was that Arnold the one in Minneapolis?
The Arnold was the one in always held in Columbus here in the United States.
Ohio.
Yep, Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
That was right as soon as some of the lockdowns and the shutdowns were happening.
Okay.
So it was kind of a weird, eerie setting going into the meet, just because it's like, wow, there should be like 200,000 people here right now for this expo. And it was just a ghost town.
Sure.
But it was also kind of cool because the only people you got to see were like the top end people in each of their professions.
Sure.
So, looking out in the crowd and seeing, some of the top end guys in the USAPL, seeing some of the top end guys in the USPA that stopped by to watch, or seeing, a lot of the strongman competitors, really puts into perspective like size of humans, like Hafthor Bjornsson in person. It's ridiculous.
Sure.
Like
and Brian and
Brian Shaw,
Eddie Hall.
Eddie Hall was not there, but who was the other really big guy? He bleeds from the nose whenever he does a deadlift. I can't think of it. It was really cool watching him because he essentially competed on one leg.
Okay.
So it was just a really fun time, but at the same time, an eerie feeling and setting.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And so since, with COVID and everything that's going on, do you see meets picking back up? Do you see yourself entering in those meets?
So meets here in Minnesota are almost back up to full swing in terms of how many we've held. We usually hold, from what I've been told from my coach, who is also the co-state chair, on top of his business partner, who is the other co-state chair. They run and put on a ton of meets here in Minnesota. Usually there's between 10 to 12 a year. I think we're on pace the next year to do 9 or 10.
Okay.
And there's always room to fill in 1 or 2 more meets. So meets for the most part are coming back. Lifters are coming back. It also helps that capacity on how many people can enter a meet is different now. It's been increased. If not, I think it's completely open at this point. So meets are slowly but surely coming back, and it's really good to see.
Okay. And so with these future meets, you entering them, what are your goals, so weight-wise, other than trying not to throw up in your mouth, or get caught in, not hitting a lift or something like that, getting called or not getting it's 3 lights, right?
Yep. So in powerlifting, we have 3 judges. They judge the lift, and you need a 2-to-1 of 2 white lights to 1 red light, or all 3 white lights to get the lift. And you can be called for any variety of things with lifts for defaults or misses. I'm a ref in the USAPL as well, and just trying to name everything off the top of my head is
right.
It's hard. You
Right.
pretty much have to always be relearning the rule book or rereading the rule book, especially when you're brand new to it.
Sure. So what are your goals?
So
weight wise, let's just stick with weight wise.
So weight wise, I'd really like to squat 600 or more, which I think is slowly but surely going to be there at my next meet in February.
Sure.
I'd love to bench over 400. I'm about 375, 380-ish right now is the best I've hit in the gym, which no one cares about gym lifts. Deadlift, 700. That's my biggest goal right now is a 700 deadlift. And if I would total 647, that's a 1,700 pound total. It's pretty dang good for a guy that weighs 205.
Sure, and that's your Wilkies or...
So Wilks is the old formula that the IPF USAPL used to use. We don't use it anymore as far as I know. The USAPL is on suspension from the IPF, but that is a whole other issue that is too annoying to talk about. So now I think what we're either using good lift points or IPF points. I know, I think it's good lift points. So that's just a entire formula that just takes into consideration your age, your weight, your gender, and then your total. Your total is the 3 lifts that you get.
Sure.
So.
Okay. And so, again, I don't know if you even mentioned this, like, how old are you now, and, like, what weight class, and, like, what, age bracket? Does it go on age? Does it just go on weight?
So the way that the USAPL and a lot of pretty much every federation does is they base it off of, there is different categories for placement based upon age and weight, and as well as gender, obviously. I am 27 years old. I am in technically the open division, and I will be in that division till I am 40 years old, so I have a long time in this division.
Okay.
I started off as a junior, and I aged out of that after a year and a half of competing. So, and I started in the 83 kilo class, which 83 kilos is like 182 pounds off the top of my head, which being 5'10" I learned is pretty ridiculous. I am now in the 93 kilo class, and eventually I'm probably going to be moving up to the 230 or 105 weight class, just because powerlifting is kind of a short man's game, and I'm not really short.
Sure. Sure. And so when you meant like ridiculous, what'd that mean? Like too big or too small?
Too tall.
Too tall.
So, like, you go around USAPL Nationals and you look at, like, all the top placers in most of the men's weight classes. It's not until the 120 class, which is, like, 260 pounds, that the average height probably doesn't go above 5'6", 5'7".
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's... Like, the top guy in my weight class, Jonathan Keiko, who is a phenomenal lifter, fun to watch, I'm, like, 5 inches taller than him.
Wow.
And I feel short sometimes, but
sure.
you want to feel tall, walk around USAPL Nationals.
Oh, sure.
It's funny. It's a good time.
Sure.
Like, powerlifting is a very fun time.
So, being 27, starting out in, amateur athletics, through a half-ass, high school team, now moving through like I would say like a professional sport that you can actually compete in as you age.
Mm-hmm.
Like what would be like good quality of advice to somebody who's either in their teens or their 20s or just like any age in general, like, like what would you have done differently, and like what advice would you give to that person if they just came onto the street and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I would like to join that.
Number one advice, check your ego.
Okay. Because
there's always somebody stronger. There's always somebody that lifts better. Get a coach. Like, that's something I regret a little bit. I shouldn't say I regret, but something I wish I would have. Yeah, regret, whatever. But getting a coach is very important, because coaches, they'll get you on the right path of managing your training, so that way you're not overdoing it all the time. Coaches are also great for helping with learning the lifts, learning how to compete, learning what the rules are. Another one, make sure, like, eat. Like, don't try and cut weight for a meet if you're not setting world records. It's pointless. Just eat, go into a meet as strong as you can be. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just take care of yourself, essentially. Get a good coach. Don't be arrogant, and make sure you're doing the small things that allow for and facilitate the best recovery possible.
Yeah, that's good. It's nice to have like that outside opinion, like you knew fitness and stuff, but it's nice to have like that outside help, professional wise, somebody being in the sport and such.
Yeah, and also having a coach that helps with your programming or does your programming, it takes so much stress out of it. Sure. Because you're not constantly overthinking something. It's easy to manage a program that way. It's easy to understand like what the outset goal is of that program, like why certain exercises are programmed the way they are, sure. what the end goal of said block is, like, oh hey, this block is like a strength block, this block is a hypertrophy block. Understanding all of that is just so much easier when you have a coach and someone that you can also bounce ideas off of with programming. It just takes a lot of stress out of it.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. This will be available on Spotify and on YouTube, so you can watch it, what we're talking about here. Otherwise, like I said, thanks for coming out, man.
I appreciate it. It was kind of funny when you asked me. I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, chit-chat about some health and fitness stuff and powerlifting. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, everybody, so that's it. So, again, that's the Getting You Wellthy podcast. I'm Elliot Wilcox, in-home fitness trainer and executive wellness manager. Have a good rest of your day. Peace out.